It's Hall of Fame weekend in Toronto. We take a look at the class and discuss if any current Maple Leafs will get the call to the Hall one day. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leafs-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. What's going on, Dave? How are you feeling on a Thursday?
Feeling pretty good. Getting ready for what's going to be a more than busy weekend usual here. Well, actually, it's always busy in Toronto, but this weekend especially.
The next couple weeks, pretty busy. It's going to be here in the city of Toronto the next couple weeks. And for someone who lives downtown, I'm not looking forward to it. You've got the Hall of Fame coming up this weekend. Obviously, that's going to bring in a lot of people to the city, to the downtown core. There's a bunch of other random conventions that are happening apparently as well. You had the boss Springsteen in town yesterday. That's pretty sweet. And Taylor Swift is coming to town next week. So that whole Swift mania situation is going to run wild. Apparently, they're expecting 300,000 people to be coming into Toronto over the next couple of weeks for Taylor Swift and that whole craze. So I'm going to stay as far away from Rogers Center as I possibly can during that. Not something that I necessarily want to be a part of. But there's also the Sport Card Expo actually. And you all know how much I love my hockey cards, and so the Toronto Sport Card Expo is going on this weekend also. So I'll be there all weekend, which will be fun. So if anyone's a card collector, actually, perfect weekend for you, to go and have some fun. It's at the International Center in Mississauga, the Toronto Sport Card Expo. I'll be there all weekend. So if you do plan on going, and you see me walking around, say hello. That'd be awesome. But yes, this upcoming weekend specifically, the Hall of Fame ceremony, the Hall of Fame weekend. So you've got a bunch of Hall of Famers, obviously, current, former Hall of Famers that are going to be in town for the ceremony. And the Hall of Fame class, pretty good one in terms of the players that are being inducted. And I know it's the Hall of Fame, so usually they're always pretty good. So take that for what you will. But the class is as follows. You got Pavel Datsyuk, you've got Shea Weber, Jeremy Roenick, Colin Campbell is being inducted, as well as David Poyle, and then Chrissy Wendell and Natalie Darwitz. So a pretty good class to be going into the Hall of Fame. I don't know, is there any one of those players that kind of stick out for you, or a memory or anything that sticks out for you when it comes to this class?
Well, I mean, Pavel Datsyuk, he's always such a showman, great two-way player, but some of the goals he would score, pulling off the Datsyuk where he do that delayed toe drag.
Got Suki and Deke.
Yeah, and he's such a skilled player. Even when he went back to Russia, he was still doing it at a late age.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Shea Weber. My memories really of Shea Weber were more from Team Canada's run in the Olympics in 2010.
Yeah.
Where I think pretty sure he shot a puck through the net.
Yes.
So, that man had a hard shot.
Yeah.
Probably one of those defensemen that deserved to win a cup that never did.
Oh, for sure. I mean, he came close, right? He came close. Obviously Montreal, when they beat Toronto, it was 3-1. We all know what happened, and he somehow led that team to a cup final, and never played again, which is kind of interesting how his career ended. It's unfortunate that it ended kind of abruptly like that after a playoff run. Him and Carey Price both just were really never able to get going after that grueling playoff run. But yeah, so congratulations. Jeremy Roenick is a player too that for a long time has been on those snub lists every year. So for him to finally get the call to the Hall is great for JR. I'm curious though, Dave, when we look at this current Toronto Maple Leafs team, do you see anyone and think, yeah, that guy's a Hall of Famer for sure?
For the Leafs, I would say I've always been a like Curtis Joseph.
Oh, I meant currently.
Oh,
Like,
oh,
yes,
current. Oh,
Joseph
on the
for
current.
sure. Yeah, currently.
Yeah, I've been on the current. I've been on the Curtis Joseph train for a bit, and Alex McGillney.
Hmm.
Let's not forget that. I always try to
Yes.
bring that up when the Hall of Fame conversation. On this current team,
Like, there's one lock for sure, but is there more? Like Matthews is the obvious
yeah.
like lock for someone who's on a Hall of Fame trajectory and probably like most definitely gets in there. Like I bet money that Matthews eventually gets the call to the Hall when his career's
Would Oliver
all
Ekman
said and done.
Larsson be a player that you would consider maybe if he wins like another cup down the road here?
I don't think so because like he never really like he was never a Norris guy though. So like what is he
True.
like? He never even I don't even know how close he's come to winning a Norris. Like has he ever even been like top 5 when it comes to winning a Norris? I don't know. Let me check. I'm looking it up right now, but I don't believe so. Like the thing with the Hall of Fame is like you got to be like a stud. So the
So his
best he ever
best,
did was 7th.
yeah.
So when he was 21 years old in a half season, he came 7th. He came 9th one year back in 2015-16. But outside of that, hasn't been a top 10 guy, and it's been way too long. So I personally would not have him as a Hall of Fame guy. Maybe a Hall of Good. I don't even know if I put him in like Hall of Very Good because like he had a run that was pretty solid there in Arizona for like 6 or 7 years. But outside of that, and again, it was solid, but it wasn't like Hall of Fame worthy.
Mhm.
Like he was never a defensive stalwart, and his career high is like 55 points. So I personally would not put him in that category in that class. Um, yeah, I don't think he would be. But I mean, you look at a guy like Mitch Marner, John Tavares, like
I
are
was
those guys like those would be the two kind of borderline players for me.
yeah, like well, we'll start with Tavares first. I think long career first former first over pick has played with Team Canada. That one's gonna be a tough one, but I mean I've seen some of the players that have gone in lately, and I think to myself like, why not a John Tavares, right? Like you look like a Daniel Alfredson has made it to the Hall of Fame. I think you could put Tavares in that category, and you know if he wins a cup, that always helps kind of put players on top. But like you can overlook the one what he did with with Team Canada, um, World Juniors. He was a star there as well. So like there's like other things outside of the NHL. I think that people have to remember when you're looking at players. But yeah, I mean Tavares, I wouldn't say he's a guarantee, but I would say like I would say there's a good chance he makes it. Marner, if he continues on the trajectory he's on, yeah, you could probably put him in that, in the category of, I wouldn't say like Matthews would be more of a lock than Marner, but Marner wouldn't be too far off.
Yeah, I'm Matthews is probably the only like lock. Like I think that he for sure is like on that Hall of Fame trajectory. It's not even like a debate for me. I think he is, if he stays healthy and continues doing what he's doing, he will certainly be a Hall of Fame bound player. It's the other two that I'm like not as certain of. Tavares, I do believe, and I think you bring up a good point. The international stuff and his junior hockey play, because it's the Hall of Fame, it's the Hockey Hall of Fame, right? Not the NHL Hall of Fame.
Mhm.
So you look at the international success, and he is arguably one of the best junior players ever to play. Absolutely torched the juniors when he was there. He's the first ever exceptional status player. I think all of that adds to his legacy, which eventually will get him into the Hall of Fame. It is just interesting, though, like when you look at those two players in particular. I don't know if you want to put William Nylander in this like maybe conversation too. You do what you want. But like the lack of individual hardware for these players, like does that hold them back in your opinion?
I don't think so, because there are players on this list that have never won awards like that. Like not on this list, but like on previous lists.
Mhm.
I'm trying to remember. Did Jeremy Roenick win any awards during his time. I don't think
Roenick.
I don't think he ever did. Like he was a top. I'm looking right now. He's a top 3 for the Calder, top 5 for the Hart. So that gives him at least in that conversation. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not seeing anything.
Yeah, not really. Did never actually won like a significant, major
Right.
award by himself. No.
Good player, like
He
3 straight
played
years with
like
100 points.
he
But
did play during like, an era where it was Gretzky,
sure,
Mario,
yeah,
Yager. Like it was just impossible to win these like offensive and point scoring awards and goal scoring awards just because I mean the talent that was there at the time and the goals that people were scoring. This guy has 513 goals in his career, 513 goals, 1,216 points. Like yeah, like those numbers are eye popping enough to where I think it was only a matter of time before he got into the Hall of Fame, and obviously he's now in. He had 250 goal seasons throughout his career, so I totally approve that Jr. should be in there.
yeah,
But like, can Marner, I guess, put together enough? Uh, seasons or with a bunch of points where or maybe it's the fact that he's, in the Selke conversation every year, never won it, but he's in the conversation. Is that enough, for him as a two-way player to consider him, a Hall of Fame worthy player or on the trajectory of being a Hall of Fame worthy player? I don't know. We'll see. I think it took a little too long for Willie to get going. I guess there is still a long, long way to go before
mhm,
we can sit here and say he's not a Hall of Famer.
yeah,
But he just had such uh, a delayed start to like that trajectory that Marner kind of shot out of the gate with. So I would say if I had to rank them, who is most likely to get the Hall of Fame call one day? I would say Tavares over Marner. I think Tavares is more likely over Marner, but I think Marner is more likely over Willie. So Tavares, Marner, and then Nylander would be like the third guy on my list that could possibly get the call to the Hall. And then I'm not sure about anyone. Like, I don't think Morgan Riley's a Hall of Fame defenseman.
no,
Chris Tanev's not a Hall of Fame defenseman. I don't think OEL's a Hall of Fame defenseman. He had a couple years that were great, but it's the Hall of Fame, not the Hall of Good, which is where I personally would put OEL in that conversation. So I think it's pretty much just like Matthews is a lock, and then there's two or three other guys on this team. You want to call them the core four, whatever you want to call them, who are kind of maybes, doorstep guys. I think Tavares is a little closer to being considered, and it makes sense because his career is longer. We have much more of a body of work to look at here, where William Marner still have quite a bit of time to add to their careers. But yeah, I'd say Matthews, Locke, Tavares, pretty close to being a Hall of Famer, and then Marner and Willie kind of on the doorstep there.
I agree with that.
All right, let's take a break. Let's come back and let's play some Cosign No Sign, Dave. It's been a couple weeks since we've gotten into that. Got some great Maple Leaf Cosign No Signs, and I've got one that also spans around the NHL. So we get into all of that and more on the other side. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by GamePicks. GamePicks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Gametime curates and makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater events, whatever you're looking to get tickets to. And they've got all-in pricing, and you could toggle the feature shows. It'll show you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. They've got great seat views with a panoramic view of your seat right in the app before you even buy it. And they've got the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NHL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Network. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you as we always are each and every weekday here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, available wherever you can get a podcast audio-wise and also up on YouTube. All right, Dave, it's time for some cosign, no sign. It's a fun little bit that we do here on the show. If you're new, we basically we make statements to each other. If we agree with them, we cosign it. If we disagree, we no sign it. Got a couple of Leaf ones, and then got a league-wide one for you guys here as well. All right, Dave, let's kick things off. Give me your first one.
The Leafs should have Yanni Gourde on their early trade bait board.
Yanni Gourde. Sell me on it, Dave. Sell me on it.
Well, I think when you're looking at what this Leafs team needs to look at ahead of the trade deadline, I know it's always early to have these proclamations.
It's never too early. Never too early to have deadline talk.
Well, I just think that when you look at where this team has really kind of lacked in terms of what the roster would need, I think center is one of those. Particularly like a person that could play a middle six center role, preferably third line center. I think Yanni Gourde fits a lot of that. You look at his time with Tampa, he was a big part of their cup runs. He's been a decent player with Seattle too, but he's a pending free agent. Seattle's not very good this year. They're going to probably be one of those sellers heading into the trade deadline. I know that Gourde's not exactly having a stellar year, so maybe you get him on the his value is not as great, but I think if you put him on this Leafs team, I think he would fit this Leafs team pretty good.
So Yanni Gourde for sure, I think is a type of player that the Maple Leafs do need, like a perfect like kind of third line center.
Mm-hmm.
Makes a lot. 5.1. You probably could get like a double retention type of situation. So like the cap hit, if they do that, probably won't mean a whole lot. You could get that down into like 1 point something million realistically. I just if I'm trying to make a deal for someone and they have a cap hit like that, even if you double retain, I probably would rather go a little bit bigger fish hunting. Like I think, for a while we talked about how this team needs a third line center. Well, it's kind of also becoming more uh increasingly obvious to me that they may not need a third line center. I think they probably would be even better off getting a second line center and then just allowing Tavares to be the third line center. Like that might be a better situation for this team. So if I'm the Maple Leafs, I think I'd be striving higher than Yanni Gourde at the deadline and getting someone who has a little bit more offensive firepower to them. And I obviously appreciate what Gourde could do for the penalty kill and what he could do, on the defensive end. But I would want someone who's got a little bit more oomph to them, a little bit more to their game. So I'm going to no sign it. I'd rather go a little bigger, better than Yanni Gourde if we're making a big time push at the deadline this year.
That's totally fair. Right now, I don't know who that second line center candidate would be. Because center is a role. It's a position that once you got a center, you don't let them go.
Right. Well, I wonder if like Ryan O'Reilly becomes available again, just because didn't David Poile come out yesterday and say I mean, we're in a rebuild, obviously. He's like,
hey,
what? Did you not see what you did this summer, pal?
Yeah, did you not spend the most money out of all the teams and try?
So, like, Ryan O'Reilly, I would much prefer Ryan O'Reilly over Yanni Gord, and, like, the
Oh, I
money's
would prefer
kind of the
Ryan
same.
O'Reilly too. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So, like, that would be, one player that I would call on at the very least and
Mhm.
see what's up. And obviously there is that clear link with Ryan O'Reilly and Craig Berube, right? Won a cup together.
True.
So that's a possibility. That's a possibility. But we could get more and more into those options later on down the road. But I would no sign Yanni Gord at this point. All right, Dave. Cosign, no sign. Anthony Stolars is the best Maple Leaf signing, free agent signing in the Matthews Marner era.
In the Matthews Marner era. Ooh. Hmm.
I mean, it's too easy to say this year, right?
I know. It's a little. I mean, I think Tandem's been a pretty good signing too. I know, like, I think when you're looking at the value of the contract, Stollers is probably better.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of signings. I probably lean towards Cosign just because what you signed him to and what he's providing, you, it's hard to beat that value. It really is. Like, he was brought in here paid a 1B goaltender salary, and he hasn't been a 1B goaltender. He's been a 1A goaltender.
So you
And
think that the Anthony Stolar signing is more brag worthy than the Tavares signing?
like, the problem with the
Guy became your
Tavares
captain.
was that, well, the thing is, okay, with the Tavares signing, that was like a monumental signing.
Still
Right.
counts.
Yeah, I think that was the most impactful signing. Maybe was the Tavares signing because of the way it changed the trajectory of the plan. Yeah, I would say Stolar has been the most valued signing in terms of like the values provided, but I would still think the Tavares signing is the most impactful because before the Tavares signing, they didn't really have they had good, obviously they had Matthews, they had Martin, they had Nylander, but they were missing that one player to kind of help push that core forward. Now I understand that they haven't made that far in the playoffs, but when you look at how you don't get a Tavares hitting the market very often, and the fact that the Leafs were able to convince him, right, to leave and pretty much make him go to market. I don't know if they made him go to market, but that was a decision he made.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I remember that day. So I would say the Tavares signing is the most monumental signing, and that would Solos is probably the most value. So I would no sign it based on the Tavares signing, probably having the big, the most
Biggest
impact,
impact, yeah.
biggest impact. But Stars has been, I think, close. I think top 3 for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, would agree with that one. All right, give me actually we'll take a break, we'll come back and we'll get to our final few cosign no signs on the other side. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
Today's show is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed is a hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. And he doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey, because it leverages over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day. Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/locked on. Just go to Indeed.com/locked on right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
The Locked On Leafs podcast continues with Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. It's an off day in Leafland. Toronto got a back-to-back coming up this weekend. Detroit on Friday and then Montreal on Saturday. So some valuable Atlantic Division points on the line this weekend. Tomorrow we will tee up those games. But for now, we'll continue with Cosign, No Sign here on the podcast. Dave, give me your next Cosign, No Sign.
I'll go with my league one first, because we were talking about national. I'm going to switch gears to a different team,
Cool.
and that's another one in the Atlantic. That's the Buffalo Sabres.
Oh,
The
boy.
Buffalo Sabres should consider making a significant trade off their roster at some point this year to
Oh,
try to rebuild.
Cosign. Cosign. It's time that that team gets it together and gets going. And I think they need a piece to put them over the top. Like Toronto did it through free agency and brought in a John Tavares. Again, hasn't worked out necessarily, but it did put this team, in a positive trajectory. I believe that Buffalo needs something, right? They haven't really been able to reel in any free agents. I don't think they signed a single free agent this year, actually.
Nope, can't really.
Anyone of any significance, at least. They've done some good things with trades, but they haven't really brought in like a heavy hitter. I think they need to bring in a heavy hitter for sure. Again, I don't know who that necessarily could be or is, but the Buffalo Sabres, they've got so many picks and prospects and kind of similar ilk too, like kind of skilled top six possible players. They already moved off of one, Matthew Savoy, to bring in, Ryan McLeod. I think there's like some other players that they could possibly, get in the mix to try and move out, whether it's like a Jack Quinn or a Peyton Krebs, or use, one of those defensemen to try and get, another forward of some kind to bolster your top six and get a legitimate perennial, 40 goal scorer to go alongside Tage Thompson. So I do think so. I think they're ready to take the next step, and they've kind of done what they can internally. They do need one other piece maybe to put them over the top and get them into the playoffs. So yeah, I'm going to co-sign it.
Yeah, as a team it's so, it must be so frustrating. Like, as much as people dog on the Leafs and their inability to get out of the first round, there are some teams that say, well, at least they get to the playoffs,
Yeah.
because Sabres, you put the Sens in that category. They just want to get to the dang playoffs. Like, they've been pushing and pushing, doing it the right way, right? Drafting a lot of skilled players, trying to go the development route, but they just haven't been able to find the ability to take that next step. I think scoring is a big one here,
Hmm.
right? You look at a guy like Jack Quinn, only 2 points in 12 games. That's not
Yeah.
what they.
One of those was an empty net goal, I might add.
Yeah, right. So it's not very good. Like Payne Krebs, part of the Jack Eichel trade, he hasn't really been, to what they would expect. Even Dylan Cousins, right? Top
Yeah.
pick there. Like it's those type of players that haven't really worked out. So you wonder, do you maybe, does a team look to one of those players and say, we'll make you a deal. Maybe you find a good trade partner and you kind of get you figure out a way to just, kind of rejig things. But I think I wouldn't say they need to rebuild in Buffalo, but I think they need
No,
to,
it
but I
can't.
do, they can't, but they need to look out and make a big shakeup
Yeah.
with their roster. I think they need to go out and get some players that are going to help bring these young players along too. Like, it's good to have good young players. Who's leading them, right? Who's helping them take that next step? I think that's something that's missing with that team.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. So we'll see. We'll see what they end up doing. All right. We'll go back to the Leafs with this one here. The Toronto Maple Leafs will regret not signing Matthews Knies before the season.
Oh, cosign 1,000%. We were talking about this a while ago. It's because guess what? Everyone's talking about his contract now. And once a player's contract started getting talked in the media, well, that's gonna make it. That's just it's the wrong beast you want if you're a Leafs front office person, because it's just
Yeah.
like
Every
with
goal
every
he
passing
scores, it's
day.
like that's another 100 grand on the contract. There's another 100 grand on the contract. Like,
Yeah, it's like, oh, let's see if we can get him at a discount. What discount can you expect now? Like,
yeah. Well,
the way he's
and
producing
now
offensively.
now he's getting a shot on the first power play unit. which
Yeah.
he wasn't earlier. But now, if he's going to be on PP1 and having opportunities to pile up even more points on the power play, I mean, that's a really, really beneficial thing for Matthew Knies that will probably allow him to rack up the points and make a stronger case for a much larger contract. So it's real interesting. I don't know. Like if
Can I?
what's the deal if you were Brad Treliving, right? You called Matthew Knies' agent today to offer him a contract. What's the number you would throw at him that would make you happy?
Oh man, the number. Well, I mean, before we were saying maybe we get them in the 4, right? The 4 million range. They're gonna want in the 5 million range now for sure. And I even think they're gonna push for 6 at this rate because
If you're getting term, yeah.
if you're getting term, he's got 7 goals, 9 points in 14 games. So like at least like he's not like a point per game player, although with the power, as you're saying, with the power play, that could increase those numbers a bit.
And he's been one of the most consistent players for the team as well.
Yes.
Like,
We haven't had a time where we've said, just not Matthew Knies' day. He's
yeah, like
doing other things. He's the player that's, you tell him to go and do something, he goes and does it, right? Be
mhm.
a, be a go and be a little bit stronger, right? All right, I'll just go and add 10 pounds of muscle in the summer, right? Like just all those like and there's not many players. Like the Leafs don't have another Matthew Knies in the system. That's the other thing too. They don't have a replacement for Matthew Knies. So actually, maybe I'll rope in this cosign with this. The Leafs should have signed Matthew Knies, made him a priority over a Jake McCabe. Would you agree with that?
Mm, no sign that. I'll no sign that only because like McCabe is a UFA at the end of the year where Nyes is an RFA. So
That
like,
and to me, so I was kind of hoping you were going to say that because to me,
mm,
that's where the Leafs maybe have a bit more of leverage in
yes.
that he is an RFA. If he was now, like I don't know how much more of an RFA status he has. I think he still has a
He
few.
still has a few years. Like
Yeah,
his ELC is just ending now, so he's got
yeah,
at least I think 3 more years,
2
3
more
or 4
years I
more
think
years.
after this. So like the Leafs can say, well, you're an RFA right now. It's not like you're 1 year away after this to free agents to being a UFA.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that's where the Leafs have a bit of. They're going to say we have time to do this, but at the same time, don't let the points pile up here before you want to have
Well,
to
you
figure
also
that
don't want to
contract out.
you also don't want to fall into a situation like Edmonton did this past year where it's, you get a little complacent with your RFAs, you're trying to be
Yeah,
cute, you're trying to penny pinch and all of a sudden some other team comes around like, "We're going to offer sheet this guy."
I think
Like
the
that's
like
what
you
we'll do. We'll go out and we'll pay this guy 5.5, $6 million a year times 4. Like we'll go and do that. So, or at
they
least gonna
might a team could do exactly as you said, as what St. Louis did and offer 6 years, and
mhm.
the Leafs be like, oh, we weren't like go and get this done now. Don't even let him be a conversation for a team, an offer sheet, because for a fact that if he gets to that point, they're gonna be talking about it. The offer sheet's gonna come up, and I think teams gonna be more willing to do them now, especially to the Leafs.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. All right, last one, Dave, and then we'll take off for the day. Ovechkin has a goal in 5 straight games. He's up to 8 goals on the year.
Yes.
Alex Ovechkin will pass Wayne Gretzky and the goal record this season. He needs, I think, what, 33 more goals? 34 more
Yeah,
goals to pass him.
34 more.
34 more goals. He's got like 69 games or something left to go, or 70 games to go.
Yeah, I'll co-sign it. I think it's going to come to close to the end because goal. No, there's some slumps. Like he's got right now a career high 20% shooting percentage, if I'm not mistaken. So like
Yeah, he's usually like a
it,
12% shooter.
he's gonna regress a little bit, but even if he regresses a little bit, that's still a really good pace for him. And like this is all. I mean, Washington's also good this year. Like
Yeah.
right? It's not like last year where they were struggling and he wasn't able to really produce a lot. He's got a bit. There's a bit more to Washington this year than just Ovechkin. So I think teams now have to respect the other players on the Capitals, and they can't just try to stop Ovi. So I'll co-sign it,
Yeah.
but I think it's going to come near close to I think it's going to be like a photo finish potentially.
I think so too. I think it will be, which is going to make it for absolute theater the last like 2 weeks of the season. As he gets closer and closer, it would suck if he finishes like 1 goal shy and we got to
Yeah,
come back and wait for that 1 goal next year. Man, would that ever suck?
it
I would
would.
hate that so much. Yeah, that'd be terrible. But I think he's going to do it. I really do. I think he's just like you say he's got a high shooting percentage, but I also think that we're gonna get to a point where he's just going to start shooting the lights out. Like every single like once he gets to within like 5, 6, 7 goals, he's just gonna shoot everything on net. So like, okay, he's got a high shooting percentage, but he's also gonna have a high volume of shots that are gonna start, filtering their way on goal. And those puppies will probably just start to, you know, trickle in somehow, get a lucky bounce here,
Mhm.
there, get a screen. We'll see. Bunch of empty netters throughout the year. Like, Ovi should be on the ice for every single empty net. Like,
Yep.
every single empty net should be on the ice, and there should be 0 other empty net goal scorers on this Washington Capitals team for the rest of the year. And if they're a good team, they should be in that situation a lot more than they were a year ago, too. So there's another opportunity for him to get going.
Yeah.
All right. That'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You could subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow to tee up the big weekend of back-to-back games. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.